Hello and welcome to another 9-minute Bible study. Our starting point, Luke chapter 4. I'm just going to read verse 27 this time. And many lepers were in Israel in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, saving Naaman the Syrian. Now let's backtrack a couple of verses here. In verse 25, and we covered the details of this in the last lesson, Elijah was sent where? It wasn't to any of the cities of Israel for his needs to be met. He was sent into a widow woman of Zarephath. What is the message here? Basically how those outside of Israel are going to accept the message of Jesus, just like the widow accepted Elijah. Now Naaman, captain of the hosts of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria, and he was a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. Now, a Syrian is what? Gentile, very good. Now, this man, he is a leper. He cannot find anyone in his nation to cleanse him of the leprosy that he has. Now, along the way in his battles, they captured a young Israelite girl and brought her back to his household. This girl tells Naaman the following, and let's read verse 3 and 4. And she said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him out of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. Basically, what? Naaman was told that his healing from leprosy was in the land of Israel, a guy by the name of Elisha. Now, what happens? To make a long story short here, Naaman gets into his chariot and goes down to Elisha the prophet's house. When he arrives there, Elisha sends a messenger outside with a message to Naaman. Go to this river and go and dip 7 times in the water. I'll read verse 10 so we get the whole context here. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall come again to thee, and you shall be clean. Now at first, Naaman was very, very grouchy and upset. Why do I have to go take a bath in this mud hole? But his servant came and said the following. Verse 13. Sometimes the servants are the most wisest people in these accounts. My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much rather then, when he said unto you, Wash and be clean. Verse 14. And he went down and dipped himself 7 times in Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and the flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and was clean. He heard the message, and then what happened? He obeyed by faith the message, went into the water, dipped 7 times, and he was cleansed. Now let's connect this to what Jesus said. There was many lepers in Israel at the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed. None. Absolutely none. Why? Because none of them came to the man of God for a cleansing. Before we get into the deeper point that Jesus has here, sometimes people have sicknesses or whatever in their lives and simply they will not come to the church to be prayed for. That's sad if you think about it. Your healing could be just as simple as going to church. Now, what was Jesus saying here? The only one who came for a healing was this Gentile. Again, how Israel is rejecting Jesus as the Christ. Not just Nazareth, but the whole country. And what's going to be the end effect? The ones who will believe are the Gentiles, those who are not Jewish. What has happened in the church age? The Gentiles, we have believed by faith the gospel message. Many of the Gentiles also have received what? Healing and deliverance because they believe in Jesus. We accepted the gospel. Now, what was the reaction of the good citizens of Nazareth about all of this? They basically, got angry, mad, verse 29, rose up and thrust him out of the city and led him unto the brow of the hill whereon their city was built, that they might cast him down headlong. Let's touch on that first part for a second. They basically ran Jesus out of their town. They rejected Jesus. They said no. Now, verse 30, Jesus passed through and went on his way to Capernaum and began his full-fledged ministry there. But understand this point. When it comes to the message of Jesus, we either have to accept it or reject it. But if we accept the message, what do we get? It goes back to verse 18, which was what? The gospel preached to the poor, the recovering of sight to the blind, the broken-hearted healed, deliverance to the captives, to set at liberty them that are bruised. All of the spiritual blessings that come with believing Jesus. If we believe in the Christ, the cross, the resurrection, it's not just forgiveness of sins. It's everything in verse 18 being ours. Now, Nazareth, they rejected the message. Did they receive any of this? Absolutely not. But for those of us who believe, this is for us. There are those who believe in Jesus. And you say, but I don't have this. You need to allow Jesus to do this. He wants to. Just allow Jesus to touch you in such a way that everything in verse 18 becomes a reality in your life. And we'll pick up with this in our next lesson.